I see you found our little hiding spot in the universe. Don't get too comfortable. This is a place where you will find those with an experience that's out of this world, and possibly deep within your life. I welcome you to the Oracles with James Tyson. Lean forward and listen. We will pull you into a supernatural journey with guests from around the world, each one experiencing some of the most extraordinary phenomena this wee planet has to offer. Now, here are the Oracles with James Tyson.
Thank you, Liam, and thank you, listener, for tuning into this episode of the Oracles with James Tyson. I am James Tyson, and today I am bringing you Kathleen Marden. She is a leading UFO researcher and author of several books, featured on-camera commentator, and international lecturer. She earned a BA degree in social work and has worked as an educator and education service coordinator while attending graduate school. She is a master-level practitioner of the quantum healing hypnosis technique. Her interest in UFOs and contact began in 1961 when her aunt and her uncle Betty and Barney Hill had a close encounter and a subsequent abduction in New Hampshire's White Mountains. She has been MUFON's Director of Experiencer Research since 2011 and is on the board of directors of the Edgar Mitchell Foundation for Research into Extraterrestrial and Extraordinary Encounters. And if you're a follower of Kathleen's work, you will know that 3 of her books were co-written with nuclear physicist, scientific ufologist, the late Stanton Friedman. They were captured, the Betty and Barney Hill UFO experience, Science Was Wrong, and Fact, Fiction, and Flying Saucers. Now, a 4th book, The Alien Abduction Files, features her friend Denise Stoner's contribution. Her 5th book just came out September 1st. It's the one we'll be talking about, Extraterrestrial Contact, What to Do When You've Been Abducted. And it's going to be very, very interesting to have Kathleen on. In 2012, she spearheaded an important research project with Denise Stoner, and it was to identify little-known commonalities among experiencers. In 2018, she completed her work on MUFON's Experiencer Research Project, a comprehensive study of 516 experiencers, and she did that with Dr. Dawn Dondre. She also participated in FREEZE, which is the Experiencer Questionnaire, or FREE, which is what we talked about, or I mentioned earlier, the Foundation for Research into Extraterrestrial and Extraordinary Encounters. FREE, get it? FREE. Anyway, she did a Experiencer Questionnaire with them to study more than 4,000 experiencers. Her articles have been published in MUFON's UFO Journal, Open Minds, Alternative Perceptions, and Fate magazine, and on several websites. Please go to her website, Kathleen Marden, with a hyphen between Kathleen and Marden.com. Again, that's Kathleen-Marden.com. And I'm going to take this opportunity to thank again the people who signed up for my Patreon, are my monthly supporters, and I want to thank or congratulate Lauren for being drawn and getting the gift of a past life regression, Carrie for getting her gift of a psychic reading, and Apola who for getting her gift of a astrological chart and reading. If you want to get into the draw that's coming up on the 15th of each month, just go to my website, theoraclesjamestyson.com, and click on donate. It'll take you to the Patreon page, and for $3 a month you get into that draw. And when we get up to that 2,222 people, we'll be sending people on trips to conferences and paranormal hotspots around North America. And gosh darn it heck, if we ever get to 3,500 people, we'll be bouncing around the world, this little wee planet we live on. But now let's bring in kicking and screaming Kathleen Marden. Well, let's say she's not kicking and screaming. She's sitting patiently in a nice home in Florida as the weather is a lot nicer than it is here. Kathleen, how are you?
I'm doing well, thanks. It's great to be with you today.
Oh, it's great to have you here, and especially somewhere warm, and kind of bringing that nice Florida weather out to the Pacific Northwest here.
Happy to do it.
Yeah, it's great. Now, you were the author of 5 books on UFOs and the non-human presence on Earth. Your 5th and latest book, The Extraterrestrial Contact and What to Do When You've Been Abducted, is an excellent guide for people who suspect that they are being abducted or bothered by aliens, and anyone who's fascinated by visitations from other worlds. Kathleen, why did you decide to write this book, and what is my listener going to expect from it when we pick it up?
Well, I felt that it was very important to write this book because there is no other book like it, and it was very necessary. I'm the Mutual UFO Network's Director of Experiencer Research, and we have up to 150 people every month coming to the members of my team seeking advice, assistance, the names of hypnotherapists or psychotherapists or support groups. These are people who are attempting to explore their own experiences to determine what is really going on in their lives. And I wrote a book and asked 3 additional members from my team, all brilliant women, to contribute to this book in their area of expertise so that we would have a general handbook or guide for people who are attempting to answer these questions about their own experiences.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting in the number of people I have come in contact with that state they either have a memory loss of anywhere from 10 hours to sometimes up to 6 months, where they have a blank chunk of time, or they've had dreams that, in fact, I interviewed a lady once who thought she was having she was part of a near-death community. She had written a book on near-death experiences and gathered together a number of people on near-death experiences. When she talked about her near-deaths, it was quite interesting because her near-deaths all occurred while she was in bed. And she had the feeling that people came and got her and took her onto a ship and flew up to a location where there was a number of relatives. And they would come back, and she claimed that as being a near death. And I said, that sounds an awful lot like an abduction. That's not a near death. You didn't fall off your bike, hit your head, and then all of a sudden you have a higher sense of spirit and things like that. You were abducted, and she was floored, absolutely floored, because no one had pointed that out to her before. I think that's because she was always the one giving the lectures and was kind of the more dominant one in the room, and people were afraid to say, that sounds like you're abducted by aliens. It doesn't sound like you died. But I've talked to people like that, but there are people out there who perceive themselves as being, I shouldn't really mention this because I think I'm the only one, or I don't think there are other people who have experienced exactly what I've experienced. How widespread is this? In your research, how widespread do you think it really is?
Well, in terms of near-death experiences, we have found that 55% of all of the experiencers who have participated in our major studies, and that includes the Edgar Mitchell Foundation for Research into Extraterrestrial and Extraordinary Encounters, of which I am a research associate and on the board of directors, and MUFON's study of 516 experiencers and abductees in general, state that they have had this near-death experience. Now, a near-death experience opens people up to other things that the general population does not have, such as increased psychic ability, and increased empathy, knowledge that you're not able to identify where it came from. Sometimes the ability to heal others, that sort of thing. But in terms of abductees meeting with dead relatives, there is a small percentage of individuals who are abductees or experiencers who are in touch with their deceased family members. Now, the question for that near-death experiencer is, did she actually have a near-death experience? She finds herself in a matrix environment with family members, or was this a UFO abduction? We can't say for certain unless we know that she was on a craft in the presence of non-humans as well.
Yeah, what she described was what I would suggest were light beings. Mm-hmm. She described them as light, and they were influencing her mind to say that they were actually family looking after her, and she was on a craft.
Okay.
In between her bedroom and wherever this location was she was going.
Was she taken on a beam of light to this craft from her bedroom?
I don't have that. I just I don't recall. This was a couple of years ago. I interviewed her, but it definitely went from being asleep to getting from bed to craft to location and then back again very quickly. Mm-hmm. So, but I say quickly, it would all happen in a night, but she perceives it may have been hours and hours and hours that she was there, but she was back in her bed relatively within 2 or 3 hours, I think.
Okay, so you're saying craft, so that implies that she did see the exterior of this craft, and she knows that it was an actual craft that she was taken aboard. She just wasn't simply aware of finding herself in a new environment, which was kind of a matrix environment that could have been any of a couple of things.
No.
Is that correct?
Correct. It was definitely, she was on a craft and saw other people on it with her, and you look out the window and see the movement. Okay. Yeah, so which was interesting. I found a friend of mine, Marianne Morgan. I don't know if you know Marianne Morgan. She's a psychic detective, worked for the government and things. She has died 9 times. And when she has her near death, she actually knows it's coming. Her last one, she fell off a horse and died, and she'll know they're coming just as the horse rears up, and she panics a bit and goes, "Oh, I know where this is going to end up," and then boom, she's dead. Then she's better, and then her ability is cranked up again, and so she when she talks about near death, it's like, it's not a near death. It's actually a death experience. You die, and then you come back. Mm-hmm. So I am a quantum healing hypnosis technique practitioner as well. So I do work not only with abductees or contactees, but I also work with individuals in past life regression. Nice. So that is very interesting because there does appear to be, for some people, a connection there. And what I find is that some individuals believe that they have been connected with these extraterrestrial beings throughout all of their lifetimes, whereas others in the past lifetime were abductees and sort of volunteered to come back to be taken again in this lifetime as part of a program to assist humanity in its development. Wow, that's interesting. That's you kind of going from, yes, I've seen a UFO to, yes, I see UFOs all the time because they're always coming back. And you get that in your past life regression therapy when you're working with somebody. It just comes back. They've had an event. they were a contactee or an abductee, and you pull that out during regression and then find out, oh, no, this has happened over and over and over again in your other lives.
Yes, and I don't ask leading questions. I use a forensic hypnosis technique where I take their statement and only ask the next question based upon what they've already said to get more information or more detail from them. So I'm not leading them in any way, but yes, that does occur.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I was in the Royal Canadian Mounted Police for 28 years, and we're taught basically to ask those type of questions too, especially if you're dealing with a victim of a sexual assault, a child. You don't say, "Did the man do this?" because you just said it was a man, and you just let them. It's called a pure version statement. You let them just go.
Yes, and that's the same thing that I do.
Yeah, and then you amplify certain points. You may pick out certain points to amplify. In your research, like one of the chapters in your book, the entire chapter actually is titled Am I Abductee or a Contactee? When you wrote that, and basically it's like a workbook, questions at the end of the chapter to assist people with it. Why is it important to differentiate between the three, and why do you use the word experiencer, contactee, and abductee? What are the significance of each of those titles, I should say?
Well, let me say first that Dr. John Mack, whom I had a great deal of respect for and knew personally, invented the term experiencer. It is a generic term that can be used for everyone who is having experiences with what they believe to be non-humans of extraterrestrial origin. The term abductee is a loaded term. It means these people were taken against their will, and there has been a negative connotation with that through the history of abduction. And the term contactee is also a loaded term because it implies that it was positive contact. And the contactee movement went all the way back to the early 1950s when people reported that they were having contact with benevolent space brothers who wanted all of us to unite and work together sort of in a communist kind of society, growing our food, and that they were going to help, and that we would no longer have any medical problems because all of that would be taken care of. They had a great deal of knowledge. They live very long lives without the medical problems and diseases that we have. There was a huge backlash by the U.S. government, at least, to this because the message was one of communism, and we were involved in a Cold War. So you certainly were clashing with federal policy when you use that term contactee. Jumping up to today, there are several prominent researchers who want to insist that we use the term contactee for everyone, regardless of the type of experience they are having. And I personally, and I have a background in psychiatric social work, had a lot of courses in psychology, and I was also an educator and education services coordinator. I believe personally that people are entitled to their own experience, and they don't need to have anyone suggesting to them that what they interpret as being highly positive really wasn't, or what they interpret as being highly negative was not. If they believe that they have been kidnapped and taken to a craft, they have the right to that feeling. We don't have the right to impose our point of view, our ideas, our thoughts upon these individuals. So we use the term experiencer to encompass people who believe they are having contact with non-human entities of extraterrestrial origin, without putting a label on it. Yet they are entitled to their own label, whatever they want to call themselves.
And you can be basically a mixture of all three: abductee, contactee, and experiencer.
You're absolutely correct. And that has happened to many people as they grow older. Initially, in their experiences, the majority were taken when they were less than 20 years old. And those are the ones that are still alive and took part in our studies. But originally, they might have been frightened. They might have been terrified. They might have felt that they were being exploited. But over time, the non-humans have begun to communicate with them, and they're remembering these messages, and they now look forward to contact. The interesting thing is that on MUFON's study, 75% of the abductee group said that they would not want their experiencers to stop if they could stop them. It was 71% overall among all experiencers who took part in that study.
Wow. Hey, now, we talk about abductees or contactees, experiencers. A lot of people kind of focus in on the extraterrestrial side of things. Do you also bump into the people who have had contact with the multidimensional beings, or even what is called the MyLab type of people, the military?
Yes, we do bump into those. Among the MyLab group, we find that about 20% of the individuals who took part in the study have had some kind of a negative experience. For MyLabs, it's 13% of the 516 individuals who took part in our study. So, not that great a percentage. Also, in terms of the multidimensional individuals, we have to look to the contactees, because oftentimes they are having contact with these invisible entities who claim that they are from other planets. If we look back in history, they'll say that they were from planets in our solar system, but now they're saying that they are from elsewhere, such as Arcturus or Zeta Reticuli, or any of a number of different places. And so you have to ask, well, why has that changed? Why did they formally tell us this? Is this now a different group who's saying that they are now out in other star systems in our galaxy? The response that we receive oftentimes from these people when they're asked that question is that, well, they just travel throughout the galaxy from place to place. I don't know if that's really a valid explanation, or if we should believe that. Because I'm pretty much evidence-based, but at the same time, I find the messages that have been given by these invisible non-humans who are able to communicate with us could be valid. They teach a lot about consciousness. They teach a lot about their reasons for being here on this planet, to lift us up, about their concern that people on this planet have, or that we are out of sync in a sense, that our spiritual development lags behind our technological development, and that as a result of this, we could end up destroying our planet because we don't have that spiritual and technological balance. So they claim that they are attempting to lift us up spiritually. But they're not willing to show themselves to us. I have done research. I've written about that in the book, too, about a contactee dating back to the 1950s. And without going into a great deal of detail about it, it's all in the book. I do want to say that there was a Navy admiral who was retired, and there was a Canadian government official and other members of the Canadian government who were involved in this research. And I have been able to acquire the correspondence files from the granddaughter of the Navy admiral, which gives us a great deal of insight into what was actually occurring. And also Alan Hynek, Dr. J. Alan Hynek, who was the astronomical consultant for Project Blue Book in that time frame back in the 50s.
Yeah.
And also Jacques Vallée later on, two highly respected investigators of UFO and contact phenomena, have written statements about this as well, about the CIA involvement in this investigation that happened back in that time frame. It's all very, very interesting. Dr. Jacques Vallée wrote about this in his book Forbidden Science as well. So it comes from multiple sources, but I was able to acquire this correspondence files from Admiral Knowles' granddaughter. And it's an eye-opener because they did verify that these were apparently extraterrestrials who were in communication with this housewife, Frances Swan, who lived in southern Maine. And she possessed scientific knowledge that was far beyond her level of education or understanding. And Admiral Knowles was so interested in the information that she gave to him that he reported it to the federal government. And there were government officials who then became involved in the investigation of all of this. And these entities claimed, just as they always do and always have been when it's positive interdimensionals, that they are here to assist in our development, that the reason we can't see them is because of the vibrational frequency. Their frequency is higher than ours. We are a denser planet, so our atoms vibrate at a lower level. It is difficult for them to lower their atomic structure so that they will be visible to us. But they hope that in the future we will be able to raise the vibration of our atomic structure, and then we will be able to see them and we will be able to interact together. So that's part of this very, very interesting message. And I know that for some of your listeners, this is going to sound really woo-woo. But
my listeners are woo-woo, so it's okay.
Oh, well, that's good. Then they have probably looked into this and realized that what more material, scientifically oriented researchers call woo-woo, those of us who have really done the research and looked for the evidence dating back into the 50s know that it is not woo-woo, that there really is something scientific to all of this. And Admiral Knowles and Wilbert Smith from the Canadian government were attempting to find scientific evidence that this was indeed happening. They were talking about the consequences of nuclear detonation. They're very, very concerned about our nuclear weapons. And they say that not only does it interfere and cause problems with the Earth's magnetic field, which they were trying to repair, but also the nuclear detonation goes out into our universe and affects everything. Well, a physical scientist would say impossible. But if you are aware of the quantum holographic universe, or if you are a quantum physicist, you will know that theoretically there are many dimensions, maybe 11 or 12 dimensions by current estimates. And the atomic structure of these begin to collapse too. So there's a breach in the fabric of these other dimensions, which can create huge problems for everyone. So that is part of the message that they are attempting to give. And I think that message is beginning to go out. I know that I've been working very hard to spread this message at the conferences where I speak and also on radio shows. So I'm happy that humans are beginning to hear about this and to learn about this. It's very important for our survival and for the survival of these interdimensional entities.
That's fascinating. I'm talking to Kathleen Marden. You can go check her website out at Kathleen Marden UFO, or just Google Kathleen Marden. And
well, wait a minute.
Hold on.
It is Kathleen-Marden.com, like a hyphen. Kathleen Marden UFO is one of my email addresses.
Oh. Well, there it just popped up in front of me on my screen here just now as you said that. I was kind of, that's interesting. It is part of your your email. Well, or if you can go to the contact part of it on our website, maybe you can get a writer and say, hey, I have an issue with something that shows up in my room, and need to talk to somebody about it. You're
don't contact me, because I will only write to you and refer you to the people that you should contact. Go to MUFON.com, MUFON.com, and scroll down to the Experiencer Research Team. I have a team of 35 people now. I started out as one, and it has grown so large that I am no longer able to even speak with individuals. So what I ask people to do now is go to MUFON.com, scroll down to Experiencer Research Team, click on to tell your story to a specialist on the team. That will take you to our page, and at the top of their page you will see the Experiencer questionnaire. Click on that. It will take you to 30 simple questions. Don't worry about your answers. It's all yes or no, true or false. And it doesn't matter what your score is. It's an icebreaker. That information will go to my assistant director on MUFON's Experiencer Research Team, Dr. George Medich. He's a retired orthopedic surgeon who spends his time helping experiencers now, along with the people on our team. So that is the way to access someone who is a specialist who will be able to assist you. And we do have people in Canada as well. We have people in Europe, in the United States, and now Canada, so we're very happy for that.
Yeah, the Canadian side, though, is kind of dropping.
It is.
Yes. We have a thing called TESA, TSA now. And one of the reasons is that MUFON, when you have a MUFON group up here, you pay X amount to MUFON in the U.S.
Yes.
And if one of our investigators up here needs gas money to go track down something, the money doesn't come north of the border.
There's no money given for any of that. It's not south of the border either. And we are an all-volunteer organization.
Okay.
And MUFON is funded by membership dues, and that is it.
Yeah.
We all volunteer our time.
So, and the other reason being, if we had a report, we had sent something to MUFON from, in this case, Ontario, we wouldn't hear back, or you wouldn't get the data back.
Well,
so it's changed, it's dropped. Because there's been that rumor, I don't know if you guys got it too, is that MUFON's been around a long time. And if somebody really wanted to stick their oar in and slow down disclosure and all this other information, they could have been infiltrated. I don't know if you've heard that conspiracy or not.
Well, I've heard that conspiracy, and MUFON is vigilant, and we do know that from time to time there have been some bad people from the intelligence community who have attempted to infiltrate every UFO organization. They're thrown out if we catch them. But I want you to know that the investigative group in MUFON is different from the Experiencer research team. We are there for support.
Yes.
We're not there as investigators. We have an investigator not an investigator, a support person on the ERT in Winnipeg. Or near Winnipeg. I can't remember the name of the city that he lives in. But
if it's near Winnipeg, it's a town. Winnipeg is the city.
Oh gosh, Yeah, but if you go onto MUFON's website, you scroll down to Experiencer Research Team, or you can actually look under different teams too, and you'll see everybody who wants their identity known who's on our team. We also have 5 mental health professionals out of that 35 people. 5 of them are mental health professionals who act as consultants only and don't speak to experiencers. But we do have people in Canada, and they are on our team, and we have worked very hard to keep them separate from the investigative arm, because not everyone wants an investigation. I'll tell you, I'm an experiencer, and I have never had an investigation of my experiences until about 1 year ago. I made a report to MUFON about a healing event that I had because I wanted it on the record. And so many people just want to be able to talk with someone who is non-judgmental, who is willing just to give them some support and advice. It can be traumatizing to have an investigation. It can bring up a lot of very fearful emotions, especially if you're still carrying trauma, underlying trauma.
And because it's volunteer-based, you've got to be very careful on who's conducting the investigation, what kind of interview skills they may have, and what, there's certain triggers you don't want to pull on a person who has had an experience.
And that is why I formed the team that I formed in 2011 when I started this. It is for the benefit of experiencers. And if anyone has any problem, I want to know about that, because, I put my name behind this. I am very committed to this as an experiencer myself. I remember hearing from individuals who had gone to MUFON looking for help, and all they got was an investigation. Sometimes people who are investigators are biased. I know that. Sometimes they're entirely ignorant. We don't want those people interacting with experiencers who are seeking help.
Yeah. It would just compound the anxiety and the stress.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And, this carries all the way back to, for me personally, into the late 60s, early 70s, when I was having contact on a more regular basis and did speak with and undergo hypnosis with what was a, quote, researcher in that time frame, and those researchers had an agenda, and they were only looking for physical evidence and your story, what they could extract from you through their type of hypnosis. And none of them in that time frame, I shouldn't say none, I would say most in that time frame, didn't have a background in a mental health field, did not know a lot about psychology, and did not have formal training to become a hypnotherapist. And they did a lot of damage. They did harm. And there was harm done to me in those days that increased my level of anxiety and that feeling of trauma because of the sort of false messages that were given to me under hypnosis and were written about in the books in that time frame about what a horrible thing was happening, how we were being exploited. And that kind of thing has an impact on people.
Oh, it certainly does. I was up into the early 90s. There was another, I shouldn't say craze, but there was a lot of hypnotherapy done on people who maybe had a little bit of time they've lost from their childhood. And I would go out as a policeman and interview people who, through hypnotherapy, disclosed that their grandfather had sexually abused them. And I would sit and take these pure version statements from people, and you could hook them up to a polygraph, and they absolutely, it was there, it was real to them, but it was influenced by the beginning and the questions leading up to their hypnotherapy session.
Absolutely.
And then you could, in the investigation, you'd find, well, her grandfather couldn't have, because he passed away before the end of this alleged constant assaulting, or he lived on the other side of the country. So they had no contact between the time. But literally, that person, it was influenced. It was planted into their brain. It became real. And it ruined a lot of people's lives. And eventually, that type of hypnotherapy was revisited, and it was people, they couldn't do it anymore. Basically, your hypnotherapist wasn't going to go into that. And again, it gets back to the beginning about leading questions.
Absolutely. And Elizabeth Loftus, Dr. Elizabeth Loftus, was the false memory syndrome researcher who was pioneering all of this work on false memories being extracted from people, either through hypnosis or by a or a psychotherapist who had an agenda and was attempting to build on this agenda. And it was unfortunate because there were some cases in the United States that involved daycares. And there was one prominent case where the children were telling the psychotherapist that they had been taken out on a boat and thrown into water full of sharks, and that one little boy was rescuing his classmates from these sharks. And, all of it was a product of a child's imagination, yet it was used to convict these innocent people at that daycare center. So, yes. I mean, we have to be very, very careful when it comes to implanting false memories.
Yeah, there was I think, is she the one who I think it was called Memory Wars. Yeah, there was in the 90s. It was early
Yes.
90s that it came up, and it without her work. And one of the like if you point towards one of the most famous people around, I guess Roseanne Barr, who had claimed her father or somebody had sexually abused her. And it was one of the ones that was proved that they couldn't have been. They weren't in the same place at the same time. But to this day, you can't tell her it didn't happen, because that is in her memory. That event is actually, and you know this better than me. Is it? It could have been a number of different traumatic events pulled together and put under one scenario that may or may not be real. But she feels all the anxieties and the stresses and everything that comes from that.
Well, that's true. And I've done a great deal of research on the use of hypnosis and on the academic studies that have been done on hypnosis. And we know that individuals who have undergone hypnosis and have had these memories implanted believe them even stronger than they would have before. That's a characteristic of hypnosis. So we have to be very, very careful.
Oh yeah, and poor. When I'm thinking about this, even back with Elizabeth Loftus, there were people who claimed she was part of a satanic ritual group abusing children, and only in there to only putting out these counter arguments on, like, say, the daycare sex abuse thing. She was putting these out to protect all these satanic groups that were running daycares, and so it was crazy.
It does sound crazy.
Yeah, she was a who was it? Diana Napolis, I think, was the I'd have to Google that, Napoli or something, but she was a conspiracy theorist that really pushed that Elizabeth was out there as part of these groups and trying to deflect attention away from all the harm daycares were doing. It was crazy. It was a crazy thing. But I'm glad, like, as far as the police, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police in 91 or 92, it basically got shut down. Is that, we'll take the complaints, but you're not going to take them at face value.
Let me give you another example that just came to mind. When I lived in New Hampshire, there was a man who was very prominent in the neighboring community. He owned a restaurant and a hotel. He did a great deal for the community. Very wonderful reputation. But there was a disabled woman who worked in the kitchen. He liked to hire disabled people and give them the opportunity. And she was undergoing counseling with a psychotherapist who apparently had an agenda. And this man ended up being arrested and accused of not only raping this woman, but of keeping rabbits in the basement of the restaurant and torturing and killing these rabbits in front of her in this ritualistic abuse. Well, I can tell you that as the investigation unfolded, it was thrown out of court. But the unfortunate thing was that this wonderful man, who was a personal friend of mine, by the way, and of my Aunt Betty Hill, was dragged through the manure. And there was some very strong voices who were saying that he was guilty and that this kind of thing cannot stand. But he was not guilty. He was completely innocent of all of this.
Yeah, and the victim, when the victims come out, they are incredibly believable because they do, to their heart of hearts, believe it really happened. And it turns that person in. It makes that, it still becomes a victim. They are a victim of the what they perceive happened, even though it didn't happen. But psychologically, they are a victim because to them, it really did happen. You have to treat them as a victim of the crime that they perceive happened, even if it didn't. So you can't just shut them up and tell them to leave. You've got to put them into counseling. You've got to address it, and it's a horrible, horrible thing.
It is
to turn somebody, like flick a switch in their brain and turn them into a victim of something horrible.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I agree completely. And there are two victims here. One is the accuser, and the other is the innocent accused.
And not only innocent accused, but anybody who supports the innocent accused becomes a victim of the crowd with the torches coming up the hill. Like they're out to get you no matter what. And if you can say no, but if you and I know if it's in writing in a newspaper somewhere, it's got to be real, right? So
to some people,
yes, because I've, as a policeman and living even my own personal life, I know it's like, no, this really didn't happen, but I'll never be able to say, I can say it didn't happen, but you've read it in a newspaper, or you saw it on TV, so therefore it must have happened because that's real, and my word isn't. Then we kind of went off on a bit of a tangent there, right from UFOs and the CIA into one of the things I wanted to mention. We were talking about the military and monitoring us to make sure a UFO or an alien race is kind of here, whether multidimensional or not, looking, kind of watching us and trying to keep us on track. It reminded me of those stories back during the Vietnam War, where the U.S. was told, you can't go further up this river or the Chinese are going to be mad, and basically they've got nuclear weapons and that's all we need. And the boats were pushing their way up, the little river boats, the U.S. military river boats were pushing up the river, and they'd encounter UFOs. Mm-hmm. Like literally above them on the water. They'd shoot at them, the bullets would just kind of bounce off and kind of push them. The UFOs were keeping them out of going that extra distance to possibly trigger a nuclear war. And I think it was an Australian frigate or something actually shot at one of these things, and the round came back and punctured a hole in the side of the hull, and it sunk, so it shot itself. And the Air Force, U.S. Air Force, was told eventually, do not chase these things because they're shutting off your electrical power, and we're losing a $3 million aircraft, or whatever they would have been back then. So,
yes, back in the 50s, there was a shoot them down order, and we did lose planes as a result of that.
Yeah, they would just shut them down. And taking that back to, my dad was in a Mitchell B-25 bomber during the Second World War. I used to always tease him. He wasn't bombing the Germans. He was bombing the French because he only bombed France. But the Foo Fighters. My belief, my true belief in this is that they were flying up beside the aircraft and scanning them to see what was inside of it. Like, you have nuclear weapons now. We're going to check this one out. Mm-hmm. And that's what they were doing. They weren't doing anything other than they're sending them out like a little drone, scan it, and I guess they just they missed the Enola Gay. That's they weren't working that day. But it was that okay. At which point are we going to have to step in because these idiots are going to kill themselves off or wipe out a large portion of the planet? And I still think, and they're influencing a lot of the things that we do. Or have been influencing a lot of things we do when it comes to mining and oil exploration and things like that. They're really paying attention to what we're doing to the planet itself. Are you getting, like, as an experiencer, and I want to also get into your experience a little more too. I've got this very interesting feeling you're actually very intuitive to the point of being a medium. So I was wondering, are you getting anything similar to, like, they are here basically look after us so we don't stub our toe, and I feel like we're a bunch of little toddlers and they're running around putting the little bumpers on the corners of the table so we don't hurt ourselves and locking up the lower cabinets on us.
Yes, well, I have to say that the information that they have given me indicates that they are here to assist in our development. They are the ones who told me that spiritually and technologically we are out of sync. Other people, I never repeat anything that is told only to me without having confirmation from many others as well. So yes, I have had the confirmation of that too. I wanted to know at one point why they had to take skin samples from me. They told me that they were testing the level of toxicity in my body, that they're very concerned about environmental toxins as well. They're afraid that we're going to lose the ability to reproduce, and that is part of the reason for their reproductive program, but there are many other reasons as well. So, yes, they've given me information, and that information has to do with the preservation of this planet, that they have seen other planets succumb to nuclear war. They've seen environmental collapse. It might have happened here, maybe hundreds of thousands of years ago, and it could happen again. And so they are being vigilant there, and they are concerned. They have a non-interference policy, so they do what they can from the distance, but they have said that if we come to the point of no return, to the destruction of this planet, that they will intervene. And I think that we've seen that in, for example, the U.S. Had launched a nuclear, well, it was an empty nuclear warhead. And there were 2 UFOs who came and shot it down.
Right.
You hear about North Korea launching missiles now, and the missiles are failing in their launch. So it makes me wonder, are they these non-humans who are here to protect our planet involved in this as well?
Yeah, it is interesting, and I'd like to think that we do have a big brother or big sister out there looking after us, so we don't. Because I really think we're just a bunch of toddlers running around higgly-piggly with scissors right now. And we've got to be, until we develop a lot more, as you say, spiritually and technologically, if we can get those things kind of at par, they can take a step back. Have you heard about the theory about the space shuttle that blew up, Challenger? That it was carrying something into space that it shouldn't have been carrying, and they basically said, no, it's not going any higher?
No, I haven't heard that. That was, you're talking about the Challenger, the one that Krista McAuliffe, the teacher,
yes,
was on.
Yeah.
And no, I haven't, and I couldn't imagine that anything of great danger would have been carried on a craft with civilians.
Right. Yeah, there was. I was talking to. Who was I talking to? Melinda Leslie, and who puts on a lot of. She's an experiencer.
I know Melinda.
Okay, and she had somebody out, a group from NASA, on one of her tours, and they were talking about some things that they had witnessed, probably after a couple of beer. And yeah, it was very, very interesting. Next time you run into Melinda, ask her about the Challenger, her story of the Challenger, because I'm not going to repeat it because I'll get it wrong and end up having Men in Black and Men in Blue at my door. So it's like I don't want to get into that. Tell me about your experience and how old you were when it started, and what you've come to learn from that.
Well, I'm the niece of Betty and Barney Hill, first of all, and this has been generational in my family. We had made the decision never to tell anyone, but recently I have started to talk about it because the older members of the family are now deceased, and because I believe that it will help others. And I've been telling experiencers who have gotten in touch with me about this for many, many years, and no one has ever violated confidentiality. But the first time that I have conscious recall of was when my Aunt Betty Hill was conducting a series of psychophysics experiments with a team of scientists. This was back in the mid-1960s. And she was attempting to call in a craft that would land on my grandparents' farm. A craft actually did land there. It was observed by my grandmother and by a neighbor of ours who was a commercial pilot returning home from work at night. And it left physical trace evidence on the ground. It was scientifically investigated. What we didn't tell is that my mother and I ended up on the craft that night. I don't know if other family members were there or not. I only know that my mother and I were there, and we made the decision, or at that age, the decision was made for me. Do not ever tell anyone. You have a promising future, and if you say a word about this, there are people out there who will attempt to destroy your life and any promise that you have. So I didn't repeat that, and I know that there were many nasty disinformants back in that time frame, and actually continued up until fairly recently, who would attempt to destroy your life, call your sanity into question. But there was physical evidence, and I was taken periodically throughout my lifetime, more so when I was in my 20s and early 30s, and sometimes with other people who lived in the community that I was in. Later found out that they had been taken too in the same time frame from the same location. And so early on, when I was seeking help confidentially, as I said, from the early researchers who were what I would say practicing hypnosis, because what they were doing is practicing. They didn't know a lot about it, and they did a lot of damage. They increased my level of anxiety and trauma, and were very loud and vocal in their personal opinion about what was occurring and how horrific this was. When I underwent hypnosis and also I had a lot of conscious recall, the memories were not that bad. I had memories of being treated quite well. I had memories of being on a table where I was receiving strong kind of electrical frequency going through my body, almost like electric shocks, but not terribly painful. And I was being told, don't be afraid. You have nothing to fear. We love you. And they weren't saying we love you. They were projecting the strongest feeling of love that I have ever experienced. I've never felt anything like that on this planet. It was so powerful. And they would say, we're all part of the same family. So then that raises a lot of other questions. So these time travelers from the future who are coming back to try to change the direction of what occurs on our planet, even though they look like grays to us, I don't know. It raises so many questions. But also, over time, they started to give me information. And that information was benevolent. And so, how do you reconcile reconcile that. I would say I received information from benevolent Greys, and UFO investigators would laugh in my face, saying that, well, you're suffering from Stockholm Syndrome. Well, if it was Stockholm Syndrome, it went on for a very long time, dating back to earlier in my life. I just think that they have an agenda, and that agenda is that they think that all of this is negative, and they don't want to see the positive in any of it. But many of us see the positive as well, and it depends upon the group who is in contact with you. And that is borne out in the studies that I have worked on with Free and with MUFON, that experiencers say it depends on who you interact with. Some of it's positive, some of it's just businesslike, and some of it is negative. But in terms of the negative, according to our studies, only 10% stated that they were contacted by evil entities, less than 6% sadistic or hostile entities. For the most part, 48% of the experiences and 65% of the abductee group said that they were businesslike.
Mm-hmm. That professional kind of, we're here to do something and then we'll move on. Kind of,
yes.
That very professional. Like, have you ever, obviously you've read some reports about your Aunt Betty's dreams. Would you say your dreams are almost exactly the same?
No, I wouldn't.
No? Okay.
I wouldn't, and I don't have what I think are, well, I can't say that I've never dreamed about this, but I have had a lot of conscious recall, and the reason for that is that Dr. James Harder, who is the same person who worked with Travis Walton early on, who did hypnosis on me early on, gave me the post-hypnotic suggestion that I would have conscious recall for these events that occurred, and I believe that it was that suggestion that has caused me to have a lot of conscious recall. I have had dreams, and I'll tell you about a couple of those dreams because they just seem like dreams. In one of those dream experiences, I dreamed that there was a landed craft up the street from my childhood home, that I was taken up a ramp onto this craft, and that there was an entity seated at a desk. And that I said to this entity, well, let me see what you really look like, because, we have this trust now. I've known you for a long time. And so he ended up taking the mask off, and he looked like an insect. His face was like an insect. So, I think that was probably a dream, because it's very different from the other experiences that I have conscious recall for. And another dream that I had was being taken to a craft again, going up a ramp. It's landed, and they're standing there waiting for me as a young version of my Uncle Barney. And so then you have to say, well, is this a clone of Barney? Is this Barney's spirit coming to me, or was this just a dream? So I don't have the answer to those questions, but, they're dreams that I have remembered because I've been so perplexed by them.
Wow. We are talking to Kathleen Marden. She's the author of many books, and the one we're talking about right now, Extraterrestrial Contact, What to Do When You've Been Abducted. And it's fascinating. Your life is... Your life is a book in itself, young lady, so that is amazing. Now, you've got workbooks in this book.
Yes.
So it helps them, it helps an experiencer investigate their own events and to determine what is actually occurring in their life as a result of it. So you've got I think, workbooks at the end of 3 chapters.
At every chapter.
In every chapter?
At the end of every chapter, yes.
Draw a distinction between what you believe are intelligent non-human entities from outside of our earth plane and those that might be ghosts or negative spirits, parasites, angels, demons, whatever you want to throw in there. What is it your opinion is? Can you actually find a distinction between the two through the work in your workbooks and
Well, yes, I believe that I have been able to define a distinction between them, and it's taken many years of investigation by me of probably a couple of thousand of experiencers. This is back in the days when I had time to do investigations. But that was something I was attempting to do, is to determine whether or not I could actually draw a distinction. And with the help of Denise Stoner, who is my co-author on the alien abduction files, a long-term abductee herself. She's been taken since the age of 2.5, and also a paranormal investigator. She has a wealth of information, and we've worked side by side together, attempting to determine exactly what is going on. I have individuals that I've worked with who are having contact with these highly benevolent, angelic-like figures who just appear in their homes. And many of these people are terminally ill or quadriplegic, for example. And the presence of these kind of angels is wonderful for them. It gives them hope so that they can carry on. They are not taken out of their bedrooms to craft. They don't undergo the scientific experiments that abductees undergo on craft. This is kind of, I believe, benevolent spirits or angels who are coming to them. We also have people who are having highly negative experiences. And that's something that has been so perplexing to me. Are these really highly negative extraterrestrials who are taking them to these underground facilities where they're being tortured and raped, and viewing missionaries being killed in front of them and eaten, this kind of thing where it's very anti-religious, anti-Christian. Are these kinds of things really being done by extraterrestrial beings? And if so, how could life have continued on that planet? Why didn't they destroy themselves? That's a question that we developed, and I never had an answer to that. But I was searching, and I'm going to tell you a personal story out of my new book, Extraterrestrial Contact: What to Do When You've Been Abducted. I got in over my head, and out of curiosity. And I ended up delving so deeply into this that I developed my own negative entity attachment.
Wow. And
the only way that could be removed was through spiritual intervention. And the experiencer at that point, I said to the experiencer, I know what it is now. It is a demonic attachment. You need to get this removed through spiritual intervention. It was removed. And both of us are fine at this point. I'm not going to delve into that again, but I've written about it in the book that, be careful what you wish for, because you might get in over your head with this, just as I did, out of curiosity. And fortunately, I was able to get it removed. And so was this experiencer. So, wow, it came as a shock, but now I know what this is all about.
When you say that now you know what it's all about, you've kind of opened yourself up to, when you open that door to things that are non-human, your demon or your attachment, do you know where that exists, where it came from?
Well, it was under the ground. I know that. It was under the earth. It was, this man was going through a living hell. And it started with me. And so...
Interesting.
They seemed demonic in the interaction he had with them. He was never an experiencer as a child. This came after the age of 50. And what we did find in our research on our experiencer study was that there were 4 individuals who took part in our study who did not have any kind of extraterrestrial contact earlier in their lives, only after the age of 40. And when you have that kind of thing, it tends to be highly negative, and it tends to end only when there is spiritual intervention.
Okay. Because I have an attachment right now that's a bit of a nuisance, but it's going to go on its own. But it's not what you'd call demonic, and it's not elemental. It's
right.
a spirit attachment, and it was pointed out a week or so ago. And it's kind of fun. sorry. That was it. It coughs. I cough like badly. And what it is it wants my affection, and it wraps its arms around my throat, and I cough and choke.
Oh my goodness.
So, but it's going away. I just have to, if I imagine it as a hedgehog in my hand with a little smiling hedgehog, and I just say I love it, and my cough goes away. It's kind of funny, but so I'm dealing with that right now. But I've had people. I had a person living in the downstairs portion of my house who was of ET heritage, and brought in, there's a lightning rod for spirits. I've got 2 episodes of clearing that room up and pulling things off, having a person, a psychic come in and basically pull attachments off of her. But we had elemental beings, like I have 4 elemental beings under the house, because I have a ley line and 2 creeks under my house. They're fine. They come up. I have a little ghost in the house I call Annie. She's like my canary in the coal mine. She's if something else comes into the house, we kind of hear about it, or I hear about it through her. And when we were crossing things over on July 22nd, we had a shaman and a psychic here, and we moved 9 entities out of the room downstairs. The other 4 were actually the elemental beings that were in there trying to keep them all contained. And a portal had opened. It's a whole movie in itself.
Right. So you have to get the portal closed. Yeah.
So we had the portal closed. Then we started crossing people over, and they came from the eastern seaboard of the U.S. One of the psychics who first identified them says, well, they're slaves. They're Afro-American. They're slaves. And I said, we didn't have slaves. I'm in Western Canada. Nobody was really around here until the 1800s to start with. We didn't have slaves per se. She says, yeah, but they're slaves. They're just like, one guy's got his hands bound. One guy's literally on fire. But they had come through the portal. And the fellow who was on fire... It's funny, the psychic who came in remotely, she couldn't go into the room. She started coughing, like incredibly coughing. And then the psychic who came here in person said, oh, but yeah, there's a guy burning in your room. He's on fire. So so his wife and child came and got him, and we crossed over shape-shifting beings. And the ones that helped us were the 4 elemental beings that live under the house, under the ground. And he came up and actually helped hold some of the shapeshifters down while the shaman moved them to the light and got them out of here. And I've always been the mind, like, yeah, elemental beings can be real jerks and can be very predatory and can hurt us. Is that what we see as a demon? Or is it just an elemental being that really doesn't like us digging a hole in the backyard, cutting down a bunch of trees, fracking, or just we've had an incident in our life that's dropped our energy, and we're higher vibration people. When our energy drops, they step in. That is that monkey people see on our back, the monkey on our back with the face of a cat and red eyes, intercepting source energy from getting into us. So it's interesting, the overlap between demon and elemental for me. Hey, I just thought I'd vent and throw that.
Yes, and they could be the same. They could be human spirits who are in the astral realm, who were highly negative when they lived here, and now they're coming back and they're bringing that negative, sadistic energy back with them, whatever. I don't think any of us know for certain. If you ask a Catholic priest, he will have a different point of view about this, but we sort of we're all speaking about the same kinds of negative entities.
Yeah.
We just call it by different terms, and we speculate. We offer different speculations about it, but none of us knows for certain.
No, and that's what I interviewed. Do you remember Jim Mars?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, so I interviewed Jim Mars a few months before he passed away, and when he passed away, I kind of smiled and thought, okay, now you know. All the questions he had in life, all the conspiracies and the JFK thing. I said, well, you know now. So I could just see him going up to heaven or wherever we go, and JFK hands him a beer and says, sit down, I've got a story for you.
But, some people say that you really don't know more once you pass over than you knew when you were here, except for about what happens when you pass over. So who knows?
That's it. I'm not going. What's the overlap between other paranormal phenomena and contact with non-human entities from elsewhere?
Well, there is overlap. The most prevalent paranormal experiences that experiencers of contact with what we believe are extraterrestrials is the sensation that something unseen is walking on the bed. And so that is very prevalent. And also the visual sighting of orbs that appear they're lighted orbs. I have photographs of some of these and a motion picture of one. They're white. They have like a light blue, pale blue halo. Yeah. They're so beautiful, and they appear to have intelligence. Now, these non-humans will say that they contain ET consciousness, and that they come for that reason because it's less frightening to us. And we also know that it's easier for them. They don't have to lower their vibrational frequency so that they are seen full body. So it's very interesting. I had an experiencer in Winnipeg, and I have been working with this man since 2012. When I was asked to investigate his case, I did lots of evidence that his experiences are real, and he's having contact with what we believe are extraterrestrials. But he had gotten in touch with me, I think it was about 2015, and he was very distressed because he had a cancer diagnosis. He had been diagnosed with lymphoma, and the surgery was being set up. He was afraid he was going to die. And so I said to him, people who have asked for healing have been healed. And if you want to try this, it can be an experiment that we will try. And I said, first of all, do you believe in a higher power? And he said yes. And then, so I said, well, then ask the higher power for healing, but also ask your ETs for healing. Send that telepathic message out to them every day, and I will do the same thing for you. And about 2 weeks later, he sent me a video on his cell phone. He was lying in bed at night, and he was able to capture this orb that came through the ceiling, slid down the wall, and flew almost like a butterfly across the room. It hovered momentarily over his body, dove down into his body. He slept for at least 12 hours. And when he woke up, those very large nodes that he had on his neck were no larger than P at that point. And when he went in for surgery, 4 tiny necrotic nodes were removed. They were in the process of dying or had died. No sign of cancer. So there is a medical doctor in California, Dr. Joseph Burks, who has his medical records. Joe wrote about him in Free's book, Beyond UFOs, The Science of Consciousness and Contact with Non-Human Intelligence. I also have a chapter in that book. But this is what we consider to be evidence for ET healing.
That's amazing. In your dealing with him, this is kind of it's on topic but kind of sideways. But does he have any survivor guilt, like the why me? Why was I saved and the 5-year-old young girl with cancer wasn't? Is there something that is come to him that there's a reason for him to be with us longer?
He hasn't told me about any survivor guilt whatsoever. He is very grateful for the medical healing that was done on him. And he feels a very positive connection to these non-human entities who are in his life. And over the years that I have worked with him, that we have been in contact with one another, he has been able to collect more and more evidence too, and now has a girlfriend who has actually been a witness to him being lifted by many of these tiny orbs up into the air. And, then he disappeared and was, probably taken to craft and then returned. So there's been much more that has happened. And I find with the people that I investigated when I had the time to do all of this, we have been able to collect more and more evidence and information that have given us greater insight into what is actually occurring.
That's fascinating. I just get kind of a chill thinking that there's something he's going to be doing in the future for a greater good, and he's being prepped for that. It's very warming to think that there are people that are like that out there.
Yes, absolutely. And many people, I believe, are being prepped for a greater good, to uplift humanity as much as possible.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I like that. I really do, Kathleen. It's something that gives me a little bit more hope that today I will wake up and the world is still going to be relatively cold and drizzly here in the Pacific Northwest. We are talking to Kathleen Marden. You can go search her on the Google net at Kathleen-Marden.com and find out about her books. Now, you've written a very informative chapter titled Going Public. Now, Kathleen, given the possibility of ridicule by so many, why would anybody want to carry their story to the public?
Well, for some people, they believe that it will be healing. For other people, they believe that they have sufficient evidence and a message that they want to deliver to the public. Now, some people think that if they write a book, they're going to get rich. I can tell you they are not. Most people end up self-publishing, and they do not have a very wide audience at all. But some people have kept a journal of their experiences, and they simply want to share it with others. I hadn't even intended to write this chapter. It wasn't in my original proposal, and I'm a published author. I have a professional publisher. I don't self-publish. But an experiencer came up to my table a year ago when I was working at the International UFO Congress Conference in Phoenix, Arizona, and said, please write a chapter for us on what to do if we want to go public, what we can expect, how to write a book. And so I thought, she's asked for it. Here it is. I'm going to write that chapter. In the past, there has been a great deal of criticism. People have had a really hard time with this. But if the person is grounded, such as Denise Stoner, for example, who I wrote about and investigated, and she also wrote about her own experiences in the alien abduction files. If that person is grounded and scientific in what they do, then today they are not being criticized. I would not suggest to anyone who holds a job that they should do this. Denise had retired from her position, from her career, when she wrote about this. There's always the risk. So I don't want to suggest to anybody that they should take that risk without knowing the possible consequences of that risk, because there could be a lot more harm than good personally coming from writing about this. But for some people, they will only want to write for family and friends and self-publish just to get it off their chests. And I want to repeat again, you are not going to become wealthy by writing this book. You won't. Nobody ever has.
No, and the thing is, nowadays it's not as taboo as it was with Aunt Betty and Barney, and I think since around early 2000 when we started getting these shows in regards to all the paranormal shows coming out, people are feeling a little bit more comfortable coming out and saying, things have happened to me too. And yes, those people are writing books, and there's a lot of books out there now. So yes, to become, I think it's almost like therapy to
it is.
Write it and put it out there.
I agree, and I encourage experiencers to keep a diary or a journal on the night table next to the bed. Mm-hmm. And when you have an experience, write all of your memories immediately. Check yourself out for any patterned marks on your bodies. Record the date, the time. If you're aware of how much time you have missing, record that. If you're experiencing any kind of illness, record that information. Record as much data as possible. If you find pattern marks on your body, take photographs of them and keep them in your journal. You will, too, if this is happening to you, be able to collect a body of evidence over the years.
Yeah, it's... I've always talked to people, and I kind of hang out with a lot of psychic people and people who are just kind of coming into their intuitive abilities. And I say, keep a journal. Keep a journal of your dreams, because a lot of times they're more than you perceive they are. And to, in hindsight, looking back at them, you go, oh, I keep having this same dream over and over and over again. Well, why is it? Well, go have a past life regression. Talk to somebody. Or what does that dream mean to you when you wake up in the morning? How do you feel? How do you feel when you're writing it down? And keeping that journal beside your bed, and specifically if you are an experiencer of just more than that ghost standing at the foot of your bed wanting you to get up and make them a sandwich, there's a lot to be learned from writing things down.
That's true. And another thing I say is you and only you can determine whether you are being abducted by aliens or what is actually occurring in your life through your own investigation and your own collection of evidence. You cannot go to another individual and say, please validate my information for me. Because that person doesn't live in your home, they don't live in your head, they don't know what you're feeling. Specialists on my team can say, yes, I've seen those marks on other experiencers or something like that. They're going to be kind. But I have a friend of sorts now who was very negative when I first entered into conversation with him years ago. And he went to several people that he considered to be authorities in the field. He would send them photographs or whatever, and they would always shoot him down. And then he would become extremely angry, and then they would think he was a nut. And, he did have anger issues through all of this because he was looking to authority figures to give him confirmation of what he already knew was true and already had his own evidence for. And don't look to an authority for validation, because those people don't know what's going on in your life. Mm-hmm. And they're not going to back you up anyway. They're not going to come out and give a public statement saying, yes, I believe that this person has had this experience. It's really unfortunate when you send a photograph to someone who might have their own personal bias, and they'll come back and say, oh, I have an explanation for that. And then you become angry because you have more information than they do, but you're looking to that authority figure for validation. It's not a good situation to be in.
No, it's not, and it comes down to a lot of times too is the fear. It's fear-based. If
yes.
I can get somebody who I perceive as authority figure to agree or to validate what I've experienced, then it must be real. Well, no, it's as real as you believe it is. It happened
yes.
to you. You're the one with firsthand information. Don't try to bounce it off somebody else because they don't have the same information or they didn't.
That's true.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Now, your chapter, When You Want It to Stop, Coping with Strategies and Resistant Techniques, it begins with, have you ever made a survey of the descriptive terms used by the popular media when UFOs are the topic of discussion? Finding words like bone-chilling, horrifying, terrifying, screaming, horrendous, ghastly, dreadful, terrible, all the ugly ones. What messages are being embedded into the public's mind? It seems clear that we're being conditioned to experience fear and dread associated with the UFOs and non-human intelligent contact. Now, in your opinion, are we being conditioned to expect the negative? And is it getting any better since that kind of horror from the 1940s, my God, we're all going to die, coming out? Is it starting to back off a little bit?
Well, unfortunately, we have to keep in mind the fact that fear sells. And so fear-based material is going to grab the public at a greater rate than this nice fuzzy material about all of these wonderful non-humans who are coming here to assist in our development. And there are certain researchers who grab onto that fearful, very negative agenda. There are also those at the other end of the spectrum who believe that it's all highly positive. So I believe that you have to take a very solid position saying that this occurs all along the spectrum, from the highly negative to the highly positive and everything in between. But when you think about the way it's presented on television, in movies, those are the words that I found when I did just a scan of the information that was available to the public through movies, etc. And, it is fear-based. And that is not a good thing, in my opinion. And it's not a good thing, as I said earlier, to say that all of this is wonderful and it's all contactee related information as well. We have to really realize, we have to see the balance in all of this. But there are some individuals, as I stated earlier, who are having highly negative experiences. And those are the ones who want all of this to end. Among the abductees, it was 25% who want it to end. Among the experiencers in general, it was 29% who want all of it to end. So I wanted to provide information that I had been able to acquire through my years of study and investigation on just suggestions on how to make it end if you want it to. And there are a number of techniques that I have suggested that have come from other individuals, and one or two from myself, and things that people have tried and have worked, also from Denise Stoner, my co-author on the alien abduction files. And so it's there in the book. And just one of the easiest things that you can do is, if this is contact by highly negative spiritual entities, all you have to do is to appeal to a higher power. If you're a Christian, just state, in the name of Jesus Christ, my Lord and Savior, I command you to leave this room. And people report back that they've tried this and it has worked. Mm-hmm. And, so I just throw that out there as a possibility.
Yeah, it's an amazing technique to get rid of not only what I've heard of. I've never had the ET experiences, but to actually get rid of the any ghost or thing like any negative entities or spirits hanging around by invoking the name of a ascended master, Jesus, God. Archangel Michael is the one that I usually use, and it sure cleans a room out.
Yes, and I say it's not limited to the Christian population. I don't care what religion you are. Invoke the name of that higher power. Yeah. And if you're an atheist, invoke the name of the highest intelligence, and it can clear the room.
Yeah, it's basically you're just calling in other help.
Yes.
It's an energy. You're opening yourself up. The universe is going to fire some energy down, and it's letting you subconsciously use that to clear the room out, or to clear an incident. I've also heard too is you've got I talked to Travis Walton about stuff like this. If you got a little gray coming in, don't do what Travis did, punch it in the head. But you've got a gray coming in, you can look at it and say, look, I'd rather have your supervisor here. I don't want you touching me. I want a higher being here, and they'll actually back off, and the worker bees back off, and the higher intelligence or the higher being will come in and say, okay, this is what we're doing. And which is interesting that you can actually negotiate your experience with the beings.
Yes, it is possible. And those small beings who generally will just come and get you or take you back are the ones who are just the assistants.
Yeah.
They dress and undress you and assist with different things. Sometimes they make mistakes, but they will just stand up against the wall and not move unless told to do so by the higher entities on the craft.
Yeah. Now, Extraterrestrial Contact and What to Do When You've Been Abducted is an amazing book, and it's kind of a must-have for anyone who suspects they're being abducted or bothered by non-human entities, and anyone who's fascinated by visitations from other worlds. So where can my listener find your book, and what formats does it come in?
My book is available on Barnes & Noble and also Amazon. The formats that are available at both of those places are as a hard copy book, an ebook, or an audio book as well. So you can just do an online search for the name of that book, Extraterrestrial Contact, What to Do When You've Been Abducted by Kathleen Marden. And something will come up and you will be able to order it. And for individuals listening to your podcast who live in the United States, you can go to my website at kathleen-marden.com and purchase it directly from me. You will receive my autograph that way. But I don't send the book outside the United States due to the cost and it's really a hassle to try to do that. So I just do it within the U.S.
Yeah, I live about half an hour from the Washington state border, so I have a post office box there. It's like you wouldn't believe how many things won't ship up to Canada. And the other thing too is I can order something from Florida and have it shipped within 3 days to my post office box in Washington state, where if I asked for it to come via Canada Post, it seemed to take a month.
Yes.
We have a horrible postal system here. I want to thank you for showing up, and I want to point out, if you go to Kathleen's bookstore on her website, you'll be able to see a number of her books. You can, as she says, you can purchase there. Fact, Fiction, and Flying Saucers she wrote with Stanton T. Friedman, the late Stanton Friedman. Very, very cool book. Also Captured, the Betty and Barney Hill UFO Experience, Science Was Wrong. That's going to be an interesting. I'm going to talk to you about that one. That Science Was Wrong. That's going to be a good one too. The Alien Abduction Files, and of course Flying Saucers and Science, again with Stanton Friedman. Or actually, that's Stanton's book, is it?
That is Stanton's book. Yes,
but you can get it through Kathleen's website. Also, this one we've been talking about, Extraterrestrial Contact. What to Do When You've Been Abducted. Kathleen, thank you very much for dropping by.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me. I enjoyed our conversation.
And what have you got coming up before I let you go? Do you have any conferences that you're going to be showing up at?
Yes, actually, I'm leaving on Saturday for a conference. It's on a cruise ship. It leaves San Diego on Sunday for a week to the Mexican Riviera, so I'll be speaking on that. And then we're going to have a conference. It's a one-day conference in Orlando, Florida, and it's going to be on November 9th. So anyone who is nearby in Florida, or if you just want to escape the winter weather, you can go to my website, and all of the information is there, and a link on how to register for that conference.
Okay, and I want to throw something out to you. When you're on your cruise down to the Mexican Riviera, you will be going down the outside of the Baja California, heading down south, and as you're heading south, on your right is a little island called Guadalupe. It's got a military base on it. Non-Mexicans are not allowed to go there, but to the north of that island is a huge underwater electromagnetic anomaly. And it's one of the places for the great white sharks to congregate and be studied. That is the area where that UFO that we referred to as Tic Tac ends up disappearing. If you talk to the people in that island or along the Mexican coast there, it is a hotbed for UFO activity. So keep your eye open. Get one of the crew members to tell you when you're somewhere in between Ensenada and Guadalupe Island, and look to the east. And
we'll keep our eyes peeled.
Yeah, that would be great. Again, thank you very much, Kathleen.
My pleasure.
Looking forward to talking to you again about one of your other books.
Yes, I am too.
Let's roll. And hey. Let's be careful out there.
Far over the snow.